One evening, I had just come from a prayer meeting at my church in Pittsburgh. I was going to the University of Pittsburgh for undergrad at the time. I was driving a car with Wisconsin license plate. It was a blue Subaru LeSabre, and it was around 8 p.m. I was driving and I started noticing that there was a police officer following me. So I tried to drive as careful as I could at that time, and at some point he stopped me over. He pulled up and sort of stayed in his car for quite some time. I was very scared because I was alone at that minute. And within minutes, another cop car pulled behind him. They both came to my car. He asked me what I was doing around those parts. I told him that I had just come from prayer meeting. He asked for my license. I asked him if I had committed a crime, and he asked for my license and registration, please. So I gave him my license, and the next cop came over and started shining lights within the car, shining lights, and started asking me questions. What was I doing? What was I doing there? Explained again. Told him I was a student at the University of Pittsburgh. The other cop was in his car for quite some time. He then came back after about 10 minutes and gave me my license and registration and basically told me that I shouldn't be in that neighborhood and that I need to go back home. I don't exactly know why that cop pulled me over, but I couldn't help but think that I was a black woman driving a car with Wisconsin license plates.
Past experiences didn't prepare me for what should have been a routine traffic stop. I was a PGY-1 rotating at the VA, my white coat strategically draped around the passenger seat. When I saw the flashing lights in my rearview mirror, my heart sank. The officer returned to his vehicle with my license and registration, but not proof of insurance. I flashed my lights. He charged back towards my car. He yelled, "You don't know how to act. Get out of the car." He grabbed my arm and led me to his car. He and his partner made a game of telling me where and how to stand so the cameras won't see us. I thought of what their intentions may be with me out of sight of the camera. I entertained running into traffic where someone could see me. He put me in the back seat where they joked about how they should take me somewhere before they release me. My stomach turned, and I remember a moment of panic. And then, finally, it was over.
I remember my brother picking me up from high school track practice, and about a mile from the school, we heard lights and sirens from a cop car, so my brother turned into the next side street. When the cop approached the window, my brother was trying to tell him that he couldn't roll down his window, so he needed to crack the door. Next thing I knew, he was ordering my brother out the car and told him to lay face down on the ground, then told me to do the same. When my brother asked why he was being pulled over, the cop said, "Your taillight's out." He then went back to his car, I guess to run the plates, while leaving us face down on the ground for what seemed like an eternity. When he returned to the car, he said, "You're free to go," without even an apology for having two high school kids lay face down on the ground for a broken taillight.
At my high school, I was at the top of my class. I worked really hard to get absolutely perfect grades and fill my resume because I was the only African American student in my advanced classes, and I wanted everything to be perfect. But over the years, I had had teachers call me dumb or stupid in front of everyone. I had classmates and teachers describe other black students, myself, or other black residents of New Orleans as monkeys, welfare queens, thugs, animals, baby mamas, all types of things. So for my last year of high school, I took no chances, and I had teachers submit a letter of recommendation for a program I was applying to before I would need to request college letters from them. And I remember opening it and still being surprised. They described me as a middle of the road student, poor work effort, no leadership skills, poor attention span, and the one that stays with me the most is the average to below average intelligence. I remember just being shocked and sinking onto the floor and just crying to my mom and just asking her, what more can I do?
Growing up in the city of Chicago, where 40% of the city's budget is dedicated to the police department, it's fairly common to have encounters with law enforcement, especially if you live on the south or west side of the city. When tasked with discussing an unwarranted interaction, it became difficult to choose just one. Maybe I can discuss moving to the western suburbs for medical school and being pulled over in my parents' luxury car because I looked like I didn't belong. Before being excused to continue my day, I was instructed to be careful and make sure I didn't break any rules. Or maybe I could talk about the weekend before moving to Atlanta for residency, where I was stopped and questioned outside of my home for simply being outside. What's most disturbing is peacefully protesting alongside other Americans who oppose these injustices and being met with threats of violence. What has become apparent to those who can no longer ignore are the atrocities that have been experienced by all Black people, including men, women, and queer communities.
I was playing basketball with my brother and some of my cousins at an inner city park in Baltimore. We had been playing for a little while, and then we saw a cop car pull up. Quickly, there were 2, 3 cars. Next thing, in a blink of an eye, we were pushed up against fences. My brother screams out, "That's my sister." The cop rips off my hat and says, "If you want to act like a boy, I'll treat you like one." Although I was young, I was still aware that there was police brutality, as well as I had seen some sexual assaults against people who were gender nonconforming, transgender. So that ran across my mind. I was only 12. My brother told me, "Don't talk, don't speak, don't look at them." We were all cuffed, placed on the curb. The cops sat over to the side, joked a bit, came over to us, taunted us, eventually uncuffing us without any explanation as to what had happened.
It was a lazy Sunday morning in the emergency department when I was called over to detention. It's the area where our officers bring patients for medical evaluation before they take them into custody. Everything seemed pretty normal when I entered the room of a young girl who'd been in a car accident when the nurse pointed out that there was a camera, a body cam, that had been stood up in the corner of one of these very barren rooms. I was about to examine the patient and dress her fully to make sure she didn't have any injuries. So I turned and asked the officer who was standing at the entrance of the room if the body cam could be removed. He began to tell me that he didn't have to remove the body cam, that he had a right to leave it there. I very clearly stated that I didn't think that was in line with the patient's rights and that I was going to ask her to get undressed and that she'd be exposed and that I really felt strongly that the body cam needed to be moved. In the end, the body cam was moved. I was able to examine the patient. But when I left the room, the officer called over to me and insisted on speaking to me. And instead of speaking to me in the middle of that part of the department, he insisted that I follow him over to a corner where he began to berate me and tell me that patients didn't have any rights, that their Fourth Amendment rights were taken away as soon as this happened, and that I had no right to ask him to move that body cam and that I should have never done that on the video. And the more and more he spoke, as his volume raised, as he berated me, I began to realize here I was standing in my scrubs, uniform ready, fully trained emergency physician, with this man domineering over me and with his gun and yelling at me about a lack of rights. I realized I had to leave, so I kept repeating, "I'm sorry, sir, I don't agree, I have to see other patients." I must have said it 4 or 5 times before I caught the eye of another physician that was going off shift. And I quickly saddled up to him and we walked out of that part of the department together. I was shaking. Still, months later, whenever I'm called over to that part of the department, I get a little nervous.